or if you just want to jump in with questions, that's just fine. Hi, Gautam. Gautam, if you'd like to suggest anything as well for a specific use for this time, that'd be great. Otherwise, happy to do my best to field some Atlas use answers or questions. But here we are. Gautam, you're muted.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is an open forum that it is an office hours. So it is for question and answers, and people who are familiar with Atlas can offer their support. And I saw Cindy, you had some questions that you were planning to ask, I think.
Yes, our team needs help with all of our phenotypes. So,
Okay.
And I figured you guys are the ones to help. So I guess we need at least 4 phenotypes. So patients with type 2 diabetes, there were some conversations in the teams about how to index diabetes. And then we need 3 diabetic retinopathy screening outcomes, one that's in office, one that's telemedicine, and one that's AI. The telemedicine and AI outcomes should be relatively easy because we actually have great CPT codes that are well defined from 2021 onwards. So I think at some point, Patrick said for this project, we might have to search for the source code because I don't know how, if different institutions have ETL those source CPT codes. The in-office diabetic retinopathy screening is challenging because we don't have provider specialty mapped. So we're doing a quick validation at Hopkins, but that's another one to talk about. So the 2 big ones to talk about today are type 2 diabetes and in-office diabetic retinopathy screening.
And my understanding was that there are at least 2 phenotypes for diabetes in the phenotype library, and you are not sure how to choose them. So maybe do you want to talk about whether you looked at them and what tripped you over in those 2?
Yeah, I think this is an instance of, an ophthalmologist trying to define type 2 diabetes versus like an endocrinologist or primary care internal medicine person trying to define diabetes. I was perfectly content with just using the diagnosis codes, like knowing that there is going to be some misspecification, particularly with the index date. But I don't know if you saw some of the comments. So Michael Matheny at Vanderbilt is an internal medicine person, and he obviously takes care of patients with diabetes. And I guess he feels much stronger about also including labs and medicines, but also including insulin in the medicines, which our prior phenotype excluded. So I don't know. Yeah, I think we need to decide, and I'm sure there are pros and cons to both. And I just wanted to talk through like how you guys as a phenotyping group think through this and like and how to go about it.
Yeah, and Gautam will provide, and Aza, if she's on the call, will provide their thoughts. My thinking when I saw your question was as follows. So you're really using patients with diabetes as your indication cohort, because what you're actually, our focus on is diabetic retinopathy screening. So you sort of want to make sure that you capture all of the relevant patients with diabetes, which makes me think that you would like to prioritize sensitivity over specificity, because you want to make sure that you capture everybody as opposed to not capturing people because they do not satisfy some specific criteria for diabetes and then losing them down the line because you're not looking at them and you don't see screening for retinopathy. So from that perspective, it seems that the definition that optimizes sensitivity is the best, which brings me to the point that, using diagnosis code or measurements of glucose could increase sensitivity in theory. So in theory, the way I would go about it is, okay, if you want to maximize sensitivity, maybe we can create a cohort where the entry criteria is either a diagnosis code or measurements. But then the downstream challenge is that now you need to define all the measurements and whether you want them to be repetitive, because if you only see high glucose once, it's not necessarily diabetes, so on and so forth. And then with the measurements, you need to include units. So all of a sudden it gets complex. While the um, well, the downstream consequences are not that big, as opposed to usually diabetes as an outcome. So my first inclination is to go for something that is simpler, which is reuse one of the phenotypes that we have. And, you can opt for the one that excludes insulin, or you can say, well, because we don't care about specificity that much, let's not include, for example, insulin. So that was my general thinking. And if we were to,
Oh, sorry. So you would vote for the definition that includes medications or A1C. So maybe I can just share my screen.
yeah, this I was going for the same, but please do.
Yeah, so you would vote for this one rather than the condition alone one? Or the other way around?
So I would, yeah, and I'm looking through these things again. So what the first one focuses on is, as you can see, it indexed on condition of type 2 diabetes, and then inclusion, they exclude patients with prior diabetes diagnosis, secondary diabetes diagnosis, and prior type 2 or secondary. And then the second choice, it indexes on condition of type 2 diabetes or drug exposure of anti-glycemic medications or A1C, and then excludes patients with other diabetes. So from that, it seems that the second choice has a potential to be more sensitive because it has drug exposures and A1C as an alternate entry criteria. So that has a potential to capture more patients, which you want. But as I was saying, we want to now make sure that A1C units are correct. So that means that we will need to do probably some more work, but potentially the second has a chance of getting more patients, which is why I would go with it, acknowledging that there probably needs to be some more work done. Or you can say, well, I don't want to do more work because I don't think it's important, because it actually may not be that important, and go with the first one. Well, you can just grab it and go with it.
Yeah.
That was my thinking.
Got it. I mean, I guess we should answer the question of, does it make a big difference? Like, is that a question that we can answer?
Yeah, we could run. So this is something for the whole group. The next week we'll be talking about how you can now, when you have phenotypes, evaluate what you're looking at. And one of the things we use, as you Cindy know, cohort diagnostics to look at the patient composition. And we have an ability, even for those who don't have data, who have data are more than welcome to run cohort diagnostics on their data. Those who do not, we have an ability to run cohort diagnostics on J&J data. So that's why we're saying, okay, by Friday, we need to have all of the cohorts so that we run cohort diagnostics, and you can, for yourself, see if those different choices lead to any meaningful patient differences.
Okay.
So we can include both and see.
Yeah. Okay, so it sounds, Evan?
Hey, Cindy.
Hey.
I'm curious, how important is it that, I mean, I think that, the reason that Michael might have brought up, including insulin might be just because, people who come in with type 2 diabetes might need insulin initially. But they eventually, if they're type 2, they typically transition to at least some oral hypoglycemic, maybe some oral plus insulin. So how important would it be that you index at that initial dose of insulin as opposed to just indexing when they get the code or the medication. Because I guess that, for your use case, I guess if I'm surmising, I think you'd probably be okay with the latter, as
Correct.
opposed to worrying about when they first get injected with any insulin.
Correct. Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier. I think this is a difference of, an ophthalmologist trying to approach this question versus like an internal medicine person. I have a feeling, even if we added insulin to the medication list, that it's not going to be a big difference.
Yeah.
That would be my bet.
And if anything, you might get some specificity error and, start picking up people who are getting insulin for other reasons, which is rare, but like, I think there's one in there in the library that's 288, and it looks like very robust to me.
Yeah, I think the question that you're truly posing is what fraction of the people in the database truly have diabetes, don't have a diagnosis for diabetes, but have lab results to say that they have diabetes, or they have treatment that says that they are diabetes. And I know it's not a trivial amount, but there are people who have that. It's a known thing. We know that in Medicare Advantage population in the US, there has been some publications that said there are patients with the disease but don't have the diagnosis code. And that's important from a payer's perspective because that allows for their risk pool, accounting for the risk pool and risk adjustments. So there's lots of projects in the payers to identify people who have the disease, are being treated for the disease, but are not diagnosed with the disease. What is the impact of that number on your incidence rate? We do not know, right? Is it within the confidence interval or is it outside the confidence interval? And that's what you need to think about. If it's within the confidence interval, then it may not matter. If it's outside, yes, then that's like an error in your study results, a bias.
Got it. Okay. Okay, that sounds good. Thanks for that. I think that's helpful to think through. It sounds to me, at least with the type 2 diabetes phenotype, we'll compare these two, I guess, run it for phenotype, for cohort diagnostics, and maybe I'll create a third one and just add the insulin in there, or based on, other of Michael's suggestions. So we'll have 3 phenotypes for type 2 diabetes, and we'll look at them next week and decide which one.
Yeah, and when you compare those 3, if the counts are within the same range, like they increase by 1% or 2% or so on, then you can say that your incidence rate will also be in that confidence range.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, perfect. All right, so I feel good about that. We have a plan. Let's talk about the harder one. All right, so well, okay, maybe the easier ones too. So I can work with, it'd be great if someone can help me in Atlas to create these 2, because we have the source codes, but I think I'm not as facile with Atlas as I would like to be. And then in thinking through all the analysis that I need, I do think we need different versions of this definition, one in which we're indexing on the earliest event for these outcomes, and one in which we include all events.
What type of analysis would you do with all events?
All right, so that's this document. So I mostly just wanted to be able to report, so diabetic retinopathy screening is not like a one and done sort of thing. It needs to be repeated at some interval. The least amount of interval that is recommended is at least once a year. So I wanted to be able to show some graph and say, over the number of years, these are the people who are getting a screening once a year. And that to me seemed like an all events sort of thing rather than earliest event.
Yeah, the reason why I asked this question is because I think making this graph will require you some custom coding, because now you're looking at patients who you want to capture, patients who get screening every year, but then every year within what period? 5 years, 10 years? And even if you have this number in your head, I don't think the standard packages as they are are tailored to answering this specific question. So it seems to me, unless I'm missing something, to me it seems more of a custom SQL question, in which case,
And actually,
yeah,
sorry to interrupt you. If you think
Yeah.
about it as a washout period, right, in all event design, and you were saying that the patient can re-enter only if they did not have the screening in the past 365 days, washout, assuming that the screening is done every year, then every new event of diabetes without a screening in the past 365 days can be considered as a new entry date. And then the time at risk starts. The time at risk starts, and you look for the next 365 days for the occurrence of the screening. So you will be answering the question among patients who have not been screened in the past 365 days and have been observed in the data for past 365 days, what is the incidence rate of future screening? You could ask that question.
But it seems that Cindy is not interested in incidence. She's looking for, it's not really prevalence, but it's like repeating events.
Cindy,
Right.
sorry for coming in late. What is your data source?
Great question. I'm hoping it will be a combination of administrative claims as well as EHR.
So I would look at type 1 diabetes for my work, but also 160 other diseases using EHR data. And we just published a study using EHR data from 6 EHR sites, academic medical centers. And we also used, one guy did the same analysis using Medicare claims data. And the prevalence for the disease we were looking at was half in the administrative claims as opposed to the EHR data. Now, honestly, do we really know which one's correct? Not sure. Can't be sure. But I was really disappointed and surprised at the claims data. The quality of the claims data is very low from my perspective. As for diabetes, I've done a lot of work on that, the phenotypes for that, and I've read a lot of papers. The one that you should know about, if you haven't found it, is when you're trying to differentiate type 1 and type 2 diabetes, almost everyone with type 1 diabetes has a type 2 code in their record. Like 2/3. 2/3 of people with type 1 diabetes have a type 2 code, and vice versa. And that's totally screws up type 1 counts. There was a paper published in Rheumatology by the OHDSI community that showed that type 1 diabetes was a major risk factor for COVID. And they neglected to address the type 2 codes that were in their count. They thought type 1 diabetes was the most common autoimmune disease too, which is completely wrong. But it did get published. It did get published. So be careful on that. And then the other thing is that the EHR data, I mean, the good thing about claims data is it goes back a very long time. EHR data, though, if you go to your Epic system at Johns Hopkins, when did they go live with that?
Epic was 2013. Our OMOP database starts in 2016.
Yeah, but as long as the data source goes back to 2013, you've got over 10 years of data. So you're not going to worry about patients who had the disease before the EHR was implemented, because their start date is going to be irrelevant. So anyway, okay, just my comments.
Thanks for sharing.
Could you please clarify how they neglected to exclude type 2 diabetes if the definition is type 2 diabetes excluding patients with any prior type 1 diabetes code, or the other way around, type 1 diabetes code excluding all of the patients who have prior type 2 diabetes?
You asking me?
Yeah.
I don't know. They used one code with the disease to classify the person.
Okay. Because right now we're discussing two options where in both options we explicitly exclude patients with prior type 1 diabetes code.
Great. Well, prior. What if it goes type 2, type 1, type 2?
Sure, but you do not necessarily want to look forward. You want to look
Yeah.
back when you create your cohort definitions.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what your baselines are and how they match up. The one study, though, that came up with the best OROC looked at, in terms of differentiating type 1 and type 2, actually simply counted how many type 1 codes and how many type 2 codes.
Yeah.
And that was it. That delivered better sensitivity and specificity than any other algorithm.
I am familiar. I'm familiar with this research. I'm not fully convinced, but I acknowledge that this is a separate topic. Yeah, I think that will be partially helped by excluding patients with prior type 1 diabetes here.
Thankfully,
because-
from a thankfully, from a retinopathy screening perspective, all patients with diabetes type 1 or 2 are supposed to get screening.
Right, right. Good point.
Yeah, so Gowtham, like I think, and Anna, I agree. I think what I'm trying to do perhaps isn't like a tradition. It's obviously not like a traditional OHDSI like characterization package. So I think that's why I'm needing to think about finessing the cohort to get at these questions. I mean, I don't know if this is going to be relevant for other folks on this call, but it would be great to sit down with you guys to try to figure out what the anatomy of the cohort needs to look like in order to answer this question and whether or not we could even do it without custom codes, because it sounds like custom codes is going to be hard to do.
Yeah, implementing custom code will, as part of the Phenotype Phebruary, even the OHDSI network is going to be difficult because it's mostly volunteers doing it, and it's how it is. But in this particular context, I'm thinking that if you think about utilization of a screening as the event during a time at risk, the code incidence package could handle it, and it can handle repeated events cohort. So if you want to, if you use the washout period framework, you can support all events, I think.
Okay.
Otherwise, you'll have to do first, your question will be, among people who are newly diagnosed with type diabetes, type 1 or type 2, whichever you choose, as defined by the code definitions, what is the incidence of screening in the time at risk, which is 1 year? But if you want to know, among people who have type 2 diabetes at any time during their life, what is the incidence of screening, then you have to introduce a washout period to say, and reframe it as, among patients who have not been screened in the past 365 days and are known to have type diabetes, what is the incidence of screening in the next 1 year? Because a person who's been screened yesterday is not at risk of being screened in the next 300 days.
I mean, they could be, but for the purposes of what we're trying to report, that second screening within the 365 days is perhaps irrelevant.
Right.
Okay. All right. So let me think about this one. And then Gowtham, would it be okay if I pinged you with different options just to see? Okay. All right. So I'll work on that one. And then the in-office one is the most challenging one. Because So HEDIS, and everyone defines an in-office diabetic retinopathy screening as an eye exam with an eye care provider, optometrist, or ophthalmologist. And it sounds like we don't really have provider specialty mapped in OMOP. So what I wanted to do just at Hopkins as a validation, and I would love to be able to do this at maybe like a couple of sites that have specialty mapped, is to compare different definitions. So there is a series of CPT codes that are only billed by eye care providers. So these are going to be very specific. The problem is they have fallen a little bit out of favor, so they're not going to be very sensitive and they won't capture all the visits. We can combine just like regular office visit codes with a procedure. Again, very specific, but it won't capture all of the office visits. And this is the one that I'm curious about, combining an office visit code with a condition code for some sort of visual system disorder. Theoretically, it's just the eye care provider who would be, coding these. So I wanted to do this validation at Hopkins where we compared this way of identifying, office visits with an eye care provider with these other definitions to see which one we should use.
Mm.
How should I'm open to suggestions for how else to look at this problem.
You could also try the specialty providers as well, because we have the fields in OMOP for this. So it depends on the way people ETL their data. Some of the data sources have specialty, have provider information, others do not. But there are data sources that do have it. So I wouldn't discard the option with the specialty. I would create that phenotype too, and I will see what it gets us, among others that you listed.
Yeah.
Yeah, what you would experience is that when you can develop any definition, the tools allow you to provide a specialty. It's just that when you run that on certain data sources where either the provider specialty is not captured or is captured but not properly ETL'd or whatever the reason is, your sensitivity will drop a lot, and you'll have sensitivity errors, and you can see that in some data sources you see the counts and some you don't, and that's evidence for you that this won't work. And our prior experience has been that provider specialty just doesn't manifest in the data for various reasons.
Okay, got it. So it sounds like in order to test out this phenotype, I should create like almost 5 versions. Like, ideally we would get, plus all these other alternate versions, and maybe a last version that combines all of the above to see.
Right. And yeah, so we can opine based on prior experiences, but until you run it on multiple data sources, you don't have empirical evidence. And that's what we're going for. You want to have multiple variants of the core definition and say which one gives you the best operating characteristics across the network of data sources. And that will be, the final judge will be you as the PI.
Okay, got it. Okay, awesome. Well, this was very helpful. Next steps for me are to actually create these cohorts in Atlas, and then Gowtham and Anna, I'd love to get your help in figuring out the repeat outcome part of it and the washout period.
Yeah. Sounds good. Do you want to start yourself, or do you want us to create one for you and you'll get from there? How would you like to approach it?
I would like that version very much. Okay. I'm not super great with Atlas.
Yeah, so I think one of the volunteers could offer to create like a starter cohort for you, and then you can template it based on that. And
whoa,
C5.
That's so crazy. Make it stop. Okay.
I'd be happy to help out or if anyone else wants to, take a crack at it.
Awesome, that'd be great.
Sure.
And all these documents are in Teams, so I've already listed out the source codes that we would need to search for.
Cindy, you can feel free to reach out. I mean, I've got a fairly full phenotyping plate right now, but if you guys, I'm happy to kind of be there as a resource too. So just fire me an email.
All right, awesome. Thanks so much, Evan.
Okay, so then it seems that
The hand raised
Jack
to-
and Evan will create a couple of versions, and then we can reconnect in Cindy's channel. Like Jack and Evan, you can ping us and we can look at it together too.
Yeah,
And yeah,
sounds
and
good.
oh, sorry, Tanya had her hand too.
Oh, that was a next question. So we need to finish with
Oh.
Cindy's.
I think we have a plan. All right, thanks so much, everyone.
Yeah. So what I wanted to ask is actually quite a question on details and on time intervals. So if you would allow me, I would share my screen with a draft of a cohort. Let me try this thing. Can you see Atlas? Okay, wonderful. So basically, what I'm trying to replicate here is the idea of one inpatient visit with a diagnosis or two outpatient visits with a diagnosis. And I wanted to ask actually, what is the difference, like detailed difference in terms of dates, mainly, of when you use a visit with an embedded diagnosis or vice versa, basically. So I really want to make my entry index date the date of a visit, not a diagnosis. But I'm afraid that if I do it like this with visit with an embedded diagnosis, I would lose my patients because I need to specify time interval here and I will specify too narrow one. Did I make it understandable?
Yeah. Right now, the way you modeled it is that your condition has to start on the visit occurrence start date. So it doesn't help you in what you want, which is you want a diagnosis that happened anytime in the visit, if it's inpatient visit. So you would, and I'm thinking that usually we do the other way around, where you have condition and then you specify the visit, but this is because you care about the condition date. And if you were to do the other way around, you could say in the first one, I'm just thinking as we go, in this box, the first box, you see in the green, in blue cursive, add additional constraint in the days. So you can add that. And then what we want is a visit and then condition that starts 0 days before and all days after. And Gowtham will see me now. An event ends. Change index start date to index end date. No,
Like,
below. Yeah, here.
Here, okay.
No, you were right. You go slightly
I
to
was
the
here,
right,
yeah.
to the right. And index end date. So index end date is the end of the visit, I think. And then you want your condition to start between all days before and 0 days after.
Yes.
Yes,
I
0
got
days
it, yeah.
after. And then event not ends, but event starts. In this row, yeah. So let me check what we did here. So we're looking for visit occurrence of inpatient visit with at least one condition occurrence that starts anytime after the date of the visit, the start date of the visit, but it has to also start before the visit
Before
ends.
the end, yes.
Yep.
That is wonderful. Thank you so much. It looks totally logical.
I'm just wondering, Gowtham, do you remember if the index end date here is the end of the visit or the end of?
Usually it's using like
visit.
to inverse logic. It's a condition and it's inpatient visit like should cover condition, like visit should cover condition, because right now we're trying to cover visit by condition, but usually we're doing like inverse way.
Well,
visit
that's because
covering...
Tanya said she wants specifically the start date to be the visit start date, not the condition start date. So she wants the inverse.
Yeah, because
She's
I
indexing,
care.
yeah, you're indexing on visit date instead of indexing on condition, which is fair.
What I'm not
Okay.
sure, what I'm still not quite sure because I've never done it this way, is if the index end date refers to the end of the visit. I think it should, but we will see. We will need to check.
Yeah. Remind me, I forget now. It's a pop quiz to anybody. Does a condition occurrence table have a condition end date?
Yes.
Yes,
So
but we never use it.
I was going to
Just
say,
me.
I have never seen condition end date ever populated in a EHR database, and I've worked with probably 2 or 3 dozen EHR systems. It's never there. You will see a visit end date in the visit table when it's inpatient data, but not for outpatient.
Yes. So in that case, so the way Atlas SQL would be implemented is it will concatenate condition start date and condition end date. And when condition end date is not populated, it will use condition start date. That's the logic behind it. So the query will essentially say where condition start date between visit start date and visit end date, both dates included. That's how it's going to ultimately run the query, and which is, I think, what Tanya wants.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. So if we have time just for one more question, maybe it's the shorter one and easier one. So what I want to also do is in my inclusion criteria, I want to include treatment with only one antipsychotic and not with others. And the way I plan to do that is to exclude other antipsychotic. Thanks God, there are not so many of them. However, if my outcome happens, which means rehospitalization, which is totally another cohort, treatment can change. And it had happened any time in my time at risk. And basically what I'm asking is, how do I limit the period in which I'm excluding other antipsychotic to period between my index until my outcome, if my outcome is another cohort? So do I put it in here? Do I put it as a censoring event?
You usually don't want to. So first of all, you usually don't want to look forward, meaning that you want to exclude patients with prior antipsychotics before the index start date, before your visit, and you don't want to look forward. Not to introduce a mortal time bias. So what you can do is you can exclude patients on other antipsychotics before the index start. And then if you really, really don't want to capture those patients, if they get the antipsychotics after the index date, you could say the cohort exit could be censored, what you were saying, could be censored at other antipsychotics. So now what you would say, okay, we have the visit with the first psychosis. If patients were taken before the first diagnosis of psychosis ever, they were taking other antipsychotics, we don't want them because I assume we think it's not an incident case anymore. And then we're studying specific drugs. So if there are patients who started taking other drugs, we also don't want them. And this is where we would put censoring. So the patient will enter. Yeah, just to continue the thought. So if, for example, you study in drug A, the patient didn't take any drugs, they had psychosis, they entered the cohort, they were in a hospital for 5 days, and then they started taking the drug of this, they will start taking drug A, say for 5 days. Then the clinicians saw that the drug doesn't work, and they add another drug from your censored list. This patient will still be in cohort, but just for 5 days.
Yeah.
So if this is what you want, if you want this patient in the cohort for 5 days, you would implement it in the way that I said, that you exclude patients with other antipsychotics prior to index date, and then you implement censoring event as those antipsychotics.
Yes, that is exactly what I wanted. Thank you so much. It was incredibly helpful in just under 10 minutes. Thank you.
Can I ask, Anna, is that not going to induce informative censoring for anybody who switches medications due to side effects or lack of effectiveness? I mean, with that censoring rule sort of automatically, you're definitely not going to have censoring past any kind of missing at random or missing a completely at random kind of test. You'll know it's not random, and it'll be uncertain as to the impact of those features, which seem like they're substantively related to the main question. So I'm just wondering about that strategy.
Yeah, it's a method. It's a very good methods question. People do it, researchers in general, I saw doing them it either way depending on their specific research question, and censoring on other drugs is not uncommon for the reason of you don't want to look at the patients who are taking other drugs that can cause the adverse events you're studying or impact your endpoints, because you want something that is closer to clinical trials where, you look, the strictest analysis possible would be monotherapy while treated, and the most non-restrictive analysis would be, we're looking at any combo therapies intent to treat. So it's a trade-off between how strict and how generalizable you want to be with your study population. And your point about meaningful censoring is a very valid point.
I think the trade-off is different in cases like in psychiatry, where you have people switching medications fairly regularly. You've got different side effect profiles. You've got different tolerance for things. And so I think the nature of that trade-off depends a little bit on what care typically looks like. And in a lot of psychiatric care, you've got a lot of churn in what kind of medications, at least in some parts of the world. I think it's going to vary. And one of the cool things that Tatiana's looking at is how things vary across the globe. And so it might be hard to make apples to apples comparisons if you've got really different patterns of care where you've got huge amounts of churn in one part of the world, and people are like, the amount of censoring you'd get from that strategy is radically different. And I'm just making this up, in the United States versus in other parts of Eastern Europe or something like that, that there's just a potentially really non-trivial impact on that approach to censoring. So I know you gave a nice clean answer really quickly, and I'm mucking it up, but I think it's worth considering. It might have a pretty important impact on the analysis there. So.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. My hope here is that the impact of how things are done across the world will be diminished a bit with the fact that we have this time window of actually month after entry until 180 days where we are looking at the patient. So like drug churn inside the hospital will not probably matter, and it will not be visible. And if the patient, for example, gets rehospitalized in those like several days when they're actually taking the medication after they were discharged, then this is what we want to see. Yes, we will definitely lose some there, but this is to make analysis easier. And I agree that like there are other things we need to look at.
Well, I'll just tie it up real quick. I think one strategy might be to do a descriptive analysis of how much switching between medications for people who meet your initial criteria is, and how that varies in different countries of interest that you want to include in the study. If they are really very substantively different, you just may want to revisit the idea of that censoring strategy, because it might really make it hard to draw some of the conclusions you want to draw at the end of the day if you're really only looking at an uninformative subset of the patients rather than, well, in some cases, and a relatively full set in others. And you'll your ability to say what's different across regions is going to be hampered. So, but a descriptive analysis could set the stage for making that decision.
I will comment on that in the chat. This is a very good point. Chen? Well, Andrew, thanks so much. I will comment more.
Yeah. Hey, very technical kind of question. So once we have the cohort definitions ready, where should we post the link in order to get the our cohorts into the core diagnostic runs?
Yes, 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 yes. Well, there will be more emails because not everybody, not all of the study leads are on this call, but the tracker that we've been using, the one that I hope you're familiar with, the OHDSI 2025 guideline-driven evidence phenotype needs. In the progress tracker, we have the study, the lead, the phenotype, link to the phenotype library for it exists. Clinic, and we now we have these columns that represent the stage. So the clinical description done, cohort definition done, and other things that are not relevant yet, and then cohort ID in Atlas. So whenever you're ready, you will, I'm sorry, you will find your name. It's slightly stuck here, and the phenotype that you built, and next to it, you would put one in the cohort definition done, and then would provide the cohort ID in Atlas. And then on Friday, we will grab all of that. And of course, we will communicate again with study leads through emails to make sure everybody knows about it. But thanks so much for the question.
Yeah, great, thanks.
Just Evan.
Also kind of a technical type question. So I guess in follow-up to that, if the cohorts exist in the phenotype library, I presume we don't need to re-implement them in Atlas. Is that a fair assertion?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then if we are making updates to cohorts in the library, for things like clinical definitions, where a lot of them they had kind of that original post, right? Where, that's where we are basically kind of sticking the clinical definitions is in the forum post. I guess near-term question is, where do you guys want the clinical definitions to live, the clinical descriptions? Like we can certainly kind of put them up, like we have a work group page, we can put them there. But if we are in particular, updating a previously done definition, do you want us to just post those into the forum and kind of continue the conversation? You know what I mean? I think that was the idea behind the forum post, is that you can have a longitudinal conversation as these kind of cohorts are changed or evolve over time, and maybe that's the right place to stick them. It would result in a lot of forum posts. But I guess near term, where do we want them? And then long term, do we want to be posting them in the updating them in the forum?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we definitely chose the OHDSI forums before, and the reasons behind it was OHDSI forums is open to the public. They don't really need to log into anything to get access to OHDSI forums. It is Google searchable or internet searchable. Microsoft Teams is still controlled. We have opened it as much as we can to public, but still it requires some form of a login, provides restrictions. So the phenotype library is a volunteer effort. That doesn't have an enterprise software that is running behind it. It's just using free things like GitHub. So what we did was we have a community funded OHDSI forums which can take inputs from authenticated users, and we have the GitHub phenotype library where we can link that, and that's our current framework. Hopefully in the future we'll do something better, and I'm hoping and I'm wishing for that future day, but it's not there yet.
So no, I mean I think the framework, it works, and it'll allow kind of us to foster discussions around these phenotypes over time, and I think that's the idea. It was more just, how would you guys prefer that we implement those types of changes? So it sounds like near term, Anna, you were pointing me to something there on a screen share, but I might have missed.
I was just pointing to the week 1 clinical descriptions, but you were actually asking a different question of, I think, of what if we reused something from phenotype library, but then modified it based on our clinical.
Yeah, or many of them don't have clinical descriptions in the phenotype library, and so that would be the other question is, if we and I think that's a reasonable thing that would help the community evolve that collection, is that we can contribute one. And so how do we want to implement that, I guess, is the question.
I would really defer to Gowtham And I don't know if he thought of how to store descriptions in general.
Well,
Like
I
we
mean,
could
in general, it's in the forum, but this is kind of a specific to ones that, because there's a large collection there that may or may not have forum posts. I'm not positive.
Yeah,
And
me
so
neither. Me
Yeah,
neither.
if you're working on something, even just ping me and we'll just try to innovate and form
Yeah.
a solution on the fly.
yeah, sounds good. Okay.
Gowtham is like, oh, I can come up with a systematic approach in 5 minutes. And actually, when he says that, he actually can.
Yeah.
So it's pretty amazing.
Oh, I know we will.
If you
Okay, thanks.
if you ever need an intermediate place to store something in the Phenotype February 2025, there is folder 1 where people put their clinical descriptions, which is obviously not a final place by any means, but if you want an intermediate place to just store files somewhere, that would be the place.
Okay, thanks. And some of these we didn't realize, like if they were in the library, they didn't need to have one done, but we can look to try to put those out as quick as we can.
The thing is that, just to reiterate, is that it's not that things in the Phenotype library need clinical descriptions per se. They need, but it's not necessarily your task. What the clinical description means to do is just to clarify for the whole study team what you're looking at. So it can be a very brief description. It doesn't have to be long. A very brief description of what you are specifically looking for. And then you can say, okay, and this description matches what's already in the library, as opposed to saying, we're looking for a KI, there is a phenotype that's called AKI in Phenotype library, which is going to grab it, right? Because as you well know, the different people can call AKI, can model AKI in very different ways. So don't create description for already existing cohorts. Just create a brief description of what you're looking for, and that specifically for your study team to be on the same page of what you want to study.
Right. No, that's fair enough. Okay, sounds good.
Anybody anybody who's a study lead or partners of a study lead, you have any blockers that you absolutely need help right now? Is there anybody who's stuck and cannot make progress? Excellent.
I think Dima was, although I'm not sure if he's still on the call. He had, Wojtek. Dima is not on the call. He had a question, but he's not on the call. Okay.
So I have a quick question. I understand we are supposed to have the common infrastructure on the phenotype workgroup page. So if I want to help with reviewing the phenotypes or the clinical description or anything, so I wonder if we have a naming convention, like if we all put things into the Atlas demo instance, it would be nice if everyone's study would start with at least like Phenotype February FF25 underscore name of the study underscore and then the phenotypes, because otherwise it'll be a mess to collaborate. Or yeah, I mean, we might be approaching that point, and I wonder if we establish this naming convention.
No, that's a good idea. We should. I don't think you should. So note that we will we will communicate that it would be nice to have convention. I wouldn't, if I were entering as a volunteer, I wouldn't approach it from the way of let's go into Atlas and see what people done. I would look into the studies that interest me and I would connect with the study lead, because I already see that naturally people like keep conversations in different places. They have different ways of even like some of the study lists created protocols in their channels. Other had other meetings separate from this office hours. Like I had Kevin's study. We had conversations with Kevin totally off this channel. So connecting to the study lead through their channels in Odyssey would just make sure that you are up to date with the stage they're at, you know.
Okay, but I guess I don't know. It would be, we can obviously end up with a different path to it, but here's the end result. At the end of all Phenotype February, they will be in some JSON on GitHub or somewhere. But if we also want to have a view of them in Demo Atlas, again, the naming convention I would suggest is some sort of prefix for Phenotype February, and then another prefix for the project, and maybe some sort of numbering system, maybe just right after that, a short name for the cohort. But these two prefixes, the phenotype and the study, I think it might go a long way. And we may get there through different mechanisms, but I'm just thinking of and you obviously, let's say, draft a phenotype, you review it with others. So you may use your own convention, like your last name prefix in front of it as you get there. But again, at the end of the whole exercise, wouldn't that be nice if such an overview exists and we can even present to the community? Do you want to learn? Do you want to immediately when I see something in JSON, the first thing I do is just try to head it in the GUI, which is able to display it better.
I did not discard it. I started my answer by saying, yes, we should do naming convention. I'm just pointing out that if you're really interested in helping study leads, it's good to talk to the study leads. Convention, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. But I think the problem is we don't have any enforcing authority. We're just a bunch of volunteers that are coming together, and we encourage standard naming conventions so as to make work discoverable and findable and so on. Otherwise, we lose them, and that's the problem that you're trying to solve with the proper naming convention. If you have guidance that you think we can document, we just put that there and ask volunteer leads to just follow it. And if they don't, they don't. It is what it is.
Yeah. So February, I hope starts with an F. So yeah, what I present is maybe either underscore or dash, doesn't matter. What I wrote in the chat, like F25 underscore, but then even the names, the leads can pick their tag for piece. So, well, I was thinking phenotype, but February. So I was thinking of the month of February, but it could be whatever.
It's spelled through PH. It's a, I don't know if it's joke anymore, but we call phenotype February phenotypes through PH and then February through PH. Because PH. Anyway, the more I talk about this joke, the less funny.
PP25 underscore, but it's nice to reach a compromise.
PP25 is a good one, but although my 5-year-old may laugh at that.
Wojciech, sounds good. We will email study leads saying that, hey, would be nice if you do this.
Excellent.
That's a good point.
The only hard rule that I think the Phenotype February organizers are enforcing is your code definitions has to be done by Friday. Otherwise, the data partners are not able to run it. And there's only one data partner right now that is volunteered. So Anna can enforce this because she is the data partner.
I actually found out that apparently not just universities can register for all of us. So unfortunately, there's lots also of troubles with running on all of us, but such as translating I just was looking at the all of us R package for that. But if there are other volunteers, I actually ran it last week, something, and it would be possible to run things on all of us, in fact.
That'd be great.
I'm actually even looking for other folks interested in that avenue, if they if they kind of have all of us log in and they have interest in learning and advancing what's the fanciness level of using all of us, especially using all the gears which OHDSI provides, which you just have to overcome some technical stuff, but it'll be great to advance that.
So is it possible now to run OHDSI packages on all of us?
So there is an informal package from Rao Institute, which actually takes the code which was developed by my group at the National Library of Medicine a while ago. So yes, the answer is you can specify, or the goal is that once you have the phenotype definition ID, which sits on the demo server, you can just grab that ID and you can just do a bunch of setup commands, and then you can just say run ID 557845, and voila, it will run it.
Awesome.
At least that's the vision, and technically it should be possible. Again, the observation periods are not there, and you have to translate to BigQuery, and it works at 90% of phenotypes, but at least that's the vision.
Cool. Thanks.
I had a quick question, just because I'm a little bit newer to the group for the phenotyping. I'm using the industry work group. Here at Gilead, we developed our lung cancer cohort, and we spent quite a bit of time doing it, but I believe it's not like built out from a convention perspective that's in accordance with like the packages used by OHDSI Darwin. Maybe some parts of it are used, but most of it is built out in Python. I know I'd have to convert it and make it, I guess, usable from a scalability perspective for other people to use. Is it a hard deadline by Phenotype February, the end? That's when we have to submit it by, or like can we still submit phenotypes later?
Yeah, Ram, so the OHDSI Phenotype Library has a rolling acceptance process.
Okay.
So you can submit that at any time. So right now this is a focused effort for the 15 or 12 study leads to get their phenotypes done so that we can do the guidelines study. But I think for your contributions, it's to the OHDSI Phenotype Library. It can be received anytime.
Okay, thanks.
All right. I think we are at 11 o'clock. It's a little bit over. Sounds like this office hour was successful with no blockers reported by any of the study leads and the volunteers. So if there's anything that comes up, we're looking forward to working with you all at the next office hours, which is Friday at 9 a.m. In the meantime, Anna, any other action items or anything that the team needs to know?
No, we'll be touching base with the study leads just to see on which stage they are somewhere Thursday. I feel that we have some ideas about where part of the group is going, and then we don't have a good idea of which stage people are for the other half of the group. So we will be reaching out on Thursday as well proactively to see if any of the studies need pointed attention or help. So watch out for the emails, and then reach out to us if you want to contribute to the studies. Wojciech, please find a study you like and ping the study lead so that they can benefit from your expertise, because you have a lot of expertise. It would be a shame not to use it. Or if you want us to match you with somebody, happy to do that too.
Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you.
Cool. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.